got a really interesting story here in the Telegraph, James. UK economy is paying the price for decades of risk aversion. This is according to the chairman of one of Britain's biggest companies, Primark's owner, Associated British Foods. This is Michael McClintock. He's basically saying that Britain's economy has suffered from low growth because investors, politicians and the public have come to see risk-taking as a bad thing. I think he's got a great point, hasn't he?
I couldn't have written this thing better myself.
Yeah.
I think this is so necessary. You know, we all remember the horrors of 2008 and the kind of international banking crisis.
Yeah.
And there was a bit of politics here. It was Gordon Brown's fault. Oh, it was so-and-so's fault, whatever. The fact is this happened in America. When America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. And you can't control for these great big international capital flows. Again, we saw that with stuff with Liz Truss, and everyone blames Liz Truss, but the inflation and all these problems were happening worldwide.
Right.
So in the face of that kind of powerlessness, regulators, and I'm looking at here, you can see the skyscrapers of the City of London here, and people in Westminster, terrified at their powerlessness, they decided they're going to try and regulate and control everything else that they can.
Yes.
And that doesn't make us safer, but it does make us poorer.
No.
And we need to cut away all of this stuff.
And it's all running on these algorithms that have been created by people who are supposedly very clever. None of us really understand how it works. But what it does mean is that if suddenly, the economy starts to go in reverse, it's sort of turbocharged by what all the other different computer systems then do. And they tell you to sell here and they tell you to sell there. And instead of people actually using, their own intuition and their own sort of market strategies, they're just run by computers.
Exactly right. Look, the economist Milton Friedman pointed out that not a single person in the world knows how to make a pencil. Right? It's so complicated. Right? You grow the trees, you get the rubber, the bit of metal between, all that stuff. So imagine how complicated Goldman Sachs's AI algorithm for investment is. It's very, very complicated. And I don't think regulators, who are going to be paid a small amount of money and lied to anyway, are going to be able to deal with this very effectively.
4 days working from home somewhere in the Surrey countryside. Well, talking of AI, I see that McDonald's has withdrawn all of its AI bots because it set them up in about 100 different restaurants around the US. A trial of the system developed by IBM, which uses voice recognition, has now been ditched because it was ordering things like bacon ice cream and hundreds of chicken nuggets for people when they only wanted to come in for a Big Mac.
Well, I think the bacon ice cream was one of Heston Blumenthal's signature inventions at one of his fancy Michelin restaurants, right?
And avocado ice cream, and avocados that looked like ice cream but tasted like avocado. I mean, very weird. I don't know. Wonderful, right? Yes. I mean, is it wrong to order hundreds of chicken nuggets? I mean, to go and amend my own personal order. Well, I think you wouldn't want them unless you'd asked for them, I suppose, But yeah, the trial has meant, it says the ending of this trial, though, does not mean an end to concerns about AI reshaping the workplace. This technology is proven to have some of the most comprehensive capabilities in the industry, fast and accurate in some of the most demanding conditions. While McDonald's is re-evaluating and refining its plans for AOT, we look forward to continuing to work with them. So, I mean, it's coming, isn't it?
The end of the world isn't here just yet.
Meanwhile, over in North Korea, Vladimir Putin's popped in for a bit of a summit with Kim Jong-un.
This is the scary stuff. While we're worrying about the nonsense that Starmer's going to do, I think the big issue the day yesterday for Starmer wasn't actually about tax. It was the fact that Tony Blair told him it's okay to say that men have penises and women don't anymore.
Yes.
Right? That's the level of our debate. Meanwhile, our enemies who hate us and hate our ways of life and hate our freedoms, we're talking about the Islamist fascists in Iran, talking about the Chinese Communist Party, and then these two, Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un, who are evil people who want to take over or to supplant
to say
the West's
nothing
position.
Of the highly educated idiots in both this country and the United States of America, who appear to think Hamas are doing a great stroke of resistance against the fascist Israel state.
Yeah, well, quite. On that one, it's so remarkable, isn't it? If Hamas start a war, get absolutely mullered by it, and then go, we didn't think we were going to lose. You've got to stop and be nice to us now. I'm sorry, Hamas, that's not how wars work.
That's not how it works, no, exactly right. Let's talk a little bit about Justin Timberlake. He's been pictured in a mugshot. He's in a place called Sag Harbor in New York, out near the Hamptons. It's a very exclusive part of the world. He was in a hotel drinking. He says he had one martini when he was pulled over by the cops. It doesn't seem like a very good story. The thing that's fascinating about it is that the police officer was so young that he had never heard of Justin Timberlake, didn't know who he was.
Remarkable, isn't it? But I can see his mugshot there. If that's what he looks like, really hammered, God, he's still a handsome-looking chap, isn't he?
He is. Well, it could be an AI reconstruction of of Justin Timberlake. I always thought that when Meta came up with this kind of this universe where you could go and be yourself in a sort of a virtual reality. His recognition, the recognition of Justin Timberlake's sort of likeness, looked even more like him than he did, you know?
Well, given that I think the most famous song I know of his is What Goes Around Comes Around.
Yeah.
It's a bit dangerous for you to go around breaking the law in such a stupid way. I'd be
well,
worried
it
if
is.
I were
I've
him.
always said, I've never understood footballers and sportsmen and women in America who have got all the money in the world. You could literally have hot and cold running drivers, you know, sitting in Escalades outside by groups of 7, and he gets in his own car at sort of midnight or whatever it is and drives it home.
Absolutely, it's remarkable, isn't it? It reminds me of that bit in The Wolf of Wall Street where he thinks he just about makes it back.
Yes.
And then he looks out the next morning and his Lamborghini is totaled.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Poor people.
Now, you may not be a big fan of the football. I don't know whether you are. England fans are going to get full-strength beer when they play their next game because over against Serbia they were only being allowed to drink shandies. But Hey Jude is heading to be the #1 song. I was railing against this yesterday saying it's such a dirge. But because of Jude Bellingham's success, they want it to become, so it's going to apparently become #1.
Well, I love the fact that Sweet Caroline has been the big song for a little while. I think that's an absolute belter.
It is, but it's got nothing to do with sport, really, or England.
No, well, exactly.
It's one of those things.
Exactly.
It sort of came out.
It's nice to think they're going to get, I think it was 2.9% shandies in the Serbia game, but against Denmark, it's good proper 4.9% German stuff.
Yes.
But given that you're not allowed to drink at all in English football stadiums, I'm more of a rugby fan, and down in Gloucester you can drink as many beers as you want. So
well, I go to Six Nations quite a bit, and yeah, there's quite a lot of drinking going on. Although they're talking about banning it, though. You know, and in fact, the last time I was there, they had alcohol-free Guinness that they were selling. And you're just kind of going, what is the world coming to?
I took a Scottish relative to a rugby game and he bought 8 pints for the first half because he was so excited you could do it, and sat and sadly drank through them all. We're still a great country.
Absolutely right. Interesting one here on the front page of the I newspaper. This is all about IT again, a company called Atos, right? Apparently the British government has held private talks over the fate of its major IT contractor, Atos, which I believe is a French company, or their French parent company. They're facing £3.3 billion worth of cash flow problems and debts, right? But the problem is the Cabinet Office knows that this company is responsible for all sorts of processing of government business, like PIP benefits assessments, NHS appointments, and tax refunds.
Yeah, it's about £1 billion worth.
Yeah, they've given all these contracts out to the same company. So if the company goes bankrupt or bust, we're all screwed.
Well, this is meant to be the problem. You cut the size of the state and you can use external experts to deliver these sorts of things. Or you have a big state, which we know doesn't work, despite the fact that Starmer's going to try it with the Labour Party again. But you've got a small number of companies, Atos is one, and there are a few others, who are just very, very good at winning the contract. Right, that's the bit they're actually good at. They know how to fill out the 10,000 pages of forms and all the rest of it. They then get the contract. Turns out they're not very good, and there's not very much competition in the system. So I blame the government for this, for not having a robust enough setup.
After the post office scandal, did we not? That Fujitsu have still got loads and loads of government contracts, notwithstanding the Horizon cock-up, basically, including running the country's water systems. Well, isn't it strange that, you know, somehow the water in this country is a little bit polluted and a bit screwed up? Nothing has anything to do with Fujitsu. You know, unbelievable. Finally, let's talk about the former Justice Secretary, Sir Robert Buckland, who was largely responsible for bringing COVID fines to people when they were walking down the street carrying a cup of coffee when they shouldn't have been. He's now come out and said that 29,383 people fined by the courts should have their slates wiped clean. I'm staggered that people are still being chased for some of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it hasn't been done for several years because, you know, again, the state is just not very good at doing things, which is why I think it should do fewer things. I think Buckland is right on this. I think he's absolutely right. I think it's a travesty. Yeah. And I hope that this really boring COVID inquiry, where other countries have already done all of their inquiries, we're still going on, it's still costing a huge amount of money, and instead of just going, oh, well, Boris had a party.
And also, we're not really learning
how we're treating people. Exactly.
We're learning absolutely nothing, are we?
Yeah, exactly right.
And it's costing a fortune.
And again, it's this kind of, it's a cruel twist of justice, where we're not going after all these scumbags who are running around the streets with giant machetes down their trousers. We're going after people like this. We're going for a walk in COVID.
And we're talking to Dr. Carol Sikora coming up later on the show. UK cancer care lagging 20 years behind the rest of Europe. Absolute shame and shambles on this country for that.
Absolutely. Well, this is what happens when you go around saying the NHS is the best thing in the world, and you can't criticise it ever, despite all of the evidence. I mean, we never go and look at what happens in Europe on healthcare. It's much better. All these guys that want us to go back into the EU and all the bad bits, but we're not willing to look at the clever bits.
No.
It's not a criticism of the doctors or nurses. They're all lovely people, just as French doctors and nurses are, and all the rest.
I'll take your word for that. But thank you very much indeed. James Price, thank you very much indeed.